Hello and welcome. Today I am joined by Kelvin Giles, who's a performance coach, but he's gone by many different titles over the years. So Kelvin, thank you for joining.
Our pleasure. It's a real pleasure. I hope you will.
I'm doing well. So as I was saying before we started, I've been hearing your names in the 15 years. I've seen you talk a couple of times when several years back. So yeah, it's a real honor for me to be able to speak with you, and your name's cropped up in a few of my chats previously. So I'm looking forward to today.
Okay, I'll do my best.
No pressure, no pressure. So whereabouts are you speaking from today?
It's the end of the day here in Brisbane, Australia. This is my home base at the moment. I got back here in 2016 after working over 2 Olympic cycles back home in the UK, and it was time to come back then to here in Brisbane. So back home in sunny Brisbane.
So whereabouts are you from originally then?
Birmingham. I'm a Birmingham boy from God's country.
Right. Okay. So yeah. So you were born like central Birmingham?
Yeah, born in South Birmingham in 1947, just after the war, and just had a normal upbringing. Went to a comprehensive school. Wasn't a very good student, but managed just to scrape into having enough qualifications, and A levels to go to a teacher training college. And I went to Madeley College of Education in Staffordshire to be a PE teacher. I had wanted to, as all boys do, I wanted to be a professional footballer, and I'd played for West Brom and I played for Coventry in my teenage years, and then it just worked out. Dad was killed in a car accident when I was 17, and I think that made some changes to how things were going to go. Then I was lucky enough to finish up at Madeley College of Education, which is part of the Keele University system, and within 6 months of starting that teacher training as a PE teacher, I just got hooked on coaching, because I met 2 of the people that were kind enough to help me along my way, not just as a PE teacher, but into coaching. That was the late Ian Ward and the late Wilf Page. Both had been national coaches, and they presented track and field athletics to me in a way that made me want to be a national coach for Great Britain. And that's all I wanted to do for the next decade, is to become a national coach like Wilf and like Ian had been, to wear that Great Britain blazer and be nice to go to the Olympic Games as a coach. That's what I wanted to do from the age of 19. And then I was lucky as well by meeting people like Carl Johnson and Frank Dick and Bruce Longdon, Malcolm Arnold. That they were the current national coaches who, when I said I wanted to be a national coach, they guided me along the way and said, these are the things you need to do. So I took it upon myself to go and get better educated and go and do more coaching, to go to another country inside the USA collegiate system and do some coaching, to broaden my horizons, to try and become better at what I was doing. Then I returned after 2 or 3 years teaching and coaching in North America. I went back to being a head of PE in Birmingham at the Queensbridge School, and that's where I really started my major coaching as a PE teacher. I ran those after-school activities in all sorts of sports, but primarily in track and field, and just started coaching. And making all the mistakes in the world, but all the time I was lucky to have these mentors, these men I've just mentioned, that list, who were willing to help me through those formative years, to help me overcome the problems I was facing in the clumsy coaching I was doing, and time went by, and that's how it all started, basically.
So yeah, there's a couple of things there. So what were you actually coaching then? Was it multi-sport or?
No, track and field athletics.
That's
when Ian Ward was presented as the lecturer to us, presented track and field athletics. Just the way that he presented it, the inspirational way that he presented it, and understanding. He'd written a book called Athletics for Student and Coach, and for some reason, it resonated deeply with me, from a guy that had come from a soccer background in Birmingham, and I'd played some rugby as well. this was a completely different thing altogether. I can't even describe why it became a dream of mine to be a national coach for Great Britain. That's where I wanted to be, and it was because of the inspiration from these men. And then as I was learning my trade in track and field athletics, and I got to know, and I just go and watch these great coaches coach. I'll just get in the car and drive and watch them coach. And I was lucky as well, because I was doing my coaching after school, but I was also doing some small competitions myself as an athlete for Birchfield Harriers, and that introduced me to the club level of athletics as well. And so my coaching then took place more with Birchfield Harriers as I started concentrating on javelin throwing and was mentored along the way. And my coaching career started there at the age of 19.
Wow. And then you mentioned beforehand that you weren't a particularly good student. So what do you mean? Is that from an academic standpoint?
Academically, yeah. I just wanted to play football from the age of 12, and I played in some very good teams in local areas, and that's all we ever wanted to do in that age. We all wanted to be professional football players. I flirted with it along the way. I played for a couple of the local clubs who got in the Premier League and the First Division of those times, and received some instruction in that, but nothing really came of it. Mum stepped in the way at the end of the day. I think if Dad had survived, he wanted me to probably go down that pathway, but Mum was, I think, a lot smarter, and she wanted me to have a much better education. And so I battled on in school and managed to get enough O levels and enough A levels only by the skin of my teeth. And I was lucky to get a place at Madeley College. I think it's because I could play sport. I mean, I think that's an important thing to be able to do. If you should be able to at least present yourself as a coach with some general all-round skills in certain things, to be able to run and jump and throw and kick and catch and strike, to be able to demonstrate and so on. And just being an ordinary bloke in the school, playing for all the school teams, I just got enough to get me into a teacher training college.
Right. And then when you went over, it was Kentucky you went to, wasn't it, in the States? What was that like over there? That was a good
one. I contacted Ian Ward and said, look, I want to go and get involved in coaching and involved in higher education as well, to understand education a lot more. So I enrolled in the Western Kentucky University in their master's program in education. It wasn't in one of those, you can get some Mickey Mouse things across, but I went deep into master's degree in education. But inside that, there was physical education, and there was exercise physiology, and there's biomechanics, and there was the beginnings of these things going on in that. And Ian Ward had recommended that. He'd gone to North Carolina, a few of the other guys had gone across there, and Western Kentucky raised its head, and I looked into that one. And would you believe, when I arrived at Western Kentucky University, I walked smack into a guy called Alan Launder, again, one of the world-class coaches of his time. And he was an Englishman that had gone across the university there and was coaching the teams across there, a wonderful educator, a great orator, a great writer, but a very, very good educator. And I was lucky to run smack into him. And so I embraced his presence. It was funny, then he left Western Kentucky and finished up in Australia. So the next time when I finished up in Australia, I ran into Alan again, and he does wonderful coaching. So look, it's another one of those lucky things that happened. I was lucky in the fact that I came across Wolf Parish, all the people I've mentioned. But I would have gone looking for them anyway. I think to be able to turn to people that have got vast experience and who are good people as well. And that's how lucky I was. They just weren't, celebrity coaches. They were good educators and good people. And I was lucky. And that's why one of the recommendations I always have to everybody is It's all about mentoring. I'm trying to mentor the next generations coming through now, and I have been for the last 20 or 30 years, just to create a relationship with the next person coming through, because I had those people around me helping me make less mistakes with their presence. So mentorship is really important.
And then, so when you were working with these people, then what were they advising you? Was it talking about like the here and now as well as the future?
No, not really. I mean, when I kept saying to the national coaches at the time, I want to be a national coach, they said, no, you don't want to be a national coach. It's really, it's tough work. You're on all day, every day, not just working with the national teams, but you've got to look after your region in terms of coach education and things like that. And so, and it wasn't paid a lot of money, but every one of those national coaches at that time, and I mentioned them in that list, were all great in terms of education. That they knew how to, they'd got this ability to have great communication skills, great relationship skills. So they weren't going out of their, they were just treating me as a normal person. I probably drove them crazy by keeping on turning up on their doorstep or sending them letters. Remember, this is before we could send emails. We had to write things down. And they would give some general advice. I mean, the general advice was, go and coach. You've got to be able to coach athletes. Go and start coaching and coach people, and you've got to get them into the international team in some way or the other. That's how good you've got to be as a coach. You've got to be well educated. Go and understand what all this is about, from the learning, from the sciences, and so on and so forth. And then learn your own communication skills. And this is each one of those men at some stage made those recommendations to me. My job was to interpret that and go out and try and do it. And so I finished up from being a PE teacher. I became a lecturer at St. Peter's College, one of the Birmingham University colleges, a lecturer in physical education there for several years. And that took me to the next level of dealing with more adult people and creating curriculum and syllabus for, and I was coaching, teaching track and field athletics, and also teaching some of the early sciences as well. Those early steps that we were all taking in exercise physiology and biomechanics and so on. That was that next challenge for me, to improve my own education and understanding. And then from there, then I applied for national coaches positions, and then I was lucky enough in 1979 to, when Bill Marlow was the national coach for the Midlands, Bill retired. I'd made an application over previous years and wanted to be too young, but the British Athletic Board appointed me in 1979 to be national coach for Great Britain and to be responsible for the Midlands area. So that dream I'd had, it took me until I was, I think I was 28, 29, way too young. But Frank Dick, who was the coaching director then, and Wilf and all that crew welcomed me into that team, and off we went. The next thing I know, I was with the Olympic team in Moscow and trying to learn my trade, way behind all these real expert, seasoned coaches. But when you've got those around you, they were helpful. So that's the way things unfolded. I just kept committing to something I wanted to do. Changing countries, changing jobs. I say to a lot of people now, what you want to do something, what are you willing to sacrifice? So I sacrificed, being at home. I changed countries. I did all the things that I thought were the right thing to try and climb towards that position of being a national coach. It was a burning desire inside, and I finally got there.
Right.
Not because I was good enough. I wouldn't have thought, not at that age. I mean, I was 10 years too early getting that job. But it kept me going in terms of of coaching athletes. I just love coaching athletes, and I'd coached several into the British team, and at junior level and at senior level and across different events, and so yeah.
Mm. And what was the infrastructure like of the setup for within the athletics community there?
Well, this is where it was at its most powerful, I think. You had we had different regions. So you had 2 national coaches in the southeast of England and the south. You had me in the Midlands. You had Wales, a Scottish national coach, northeast and northwest. So I think there were 6 or 7 national coaches. And these were full-time professional people that led their regions. And our regions had to be looked after from a coach development point of view. And so Frank had written a new strategy. Well, we'd all got together and written a new national strategy in 79, I think, something like that, just before Moscow. And we had to continue after Moscow of laying out the new coach development plans that would be regionally developed. And within each region, there was areas in those regions that we'd work with. And that's the way it was. So you had these, not from my point of view, but these great leadership from these great educators as national coaches that were the stimulus, driven and well led by Frank Dick, and then well supported at the time by the British Athletic Board. And our job was coach development and coaching the international team at different levels, from youth through to juniors to seniors. And that was our job, and to stimulate other people as well. I made appointments of some great characters to come and support me on education and support me on performance, a performance director and an education director, and then small groups of other event-based people in the region, and Johnny Anderson and these kind of people that I'd appoint, and Dennis Doyle in high jump, and people like this that were just enthusiastic and inspirational, and they, so you can imagine this team now started to grow, and they are mentoring all the people underneath them. We worked on an event-based situation, so there was somebody in the sprints and hurdles, somebody in the in the horizontal jumps and the vertical jumps, and so on and so forth. Just choosing the right people to develop the coach development strategy that went alongside the infrastructure that we had there, and it was all club based. Well, now I look at it now, and it's just completely and utterly collapsed. For some reason, the bureaucracy have decided to go in a different direction. Those are the golden years. If you look at the 80s, and you look at the people that grew in a coaching structure, out of that structure led by Frank Dick and fully supported by all those national coaches, and then the national event coaches as well, by putting the right people in the right places, their enthusiasm and inspiration stimulated across the board, because 99% of the people that we were trying to understand and support were those volunteer coaches. 99.99% of the athletics workforce in the United Kingdom are volunteer coaches, and they have been ignored for the last 30 years. If I go back to when we had that national coaching structure, then just by having the number of people on the ground, and the right number of people on the ground at the event level and the national level, the stimulation was there. And that was borne out then, I think, if you look at going through up until the early 90s, of the effect of that generation of coaches. But it had to be built on, and unfortunately, the bureaucracy got involved and took over the sport. And it's happened in most sports as well. So, sorry, I've gone off at a tangent there.
No, it's interesting. No, it is really interesting to hear about that, because I don't quite remember. I think probably 88 Olympics was about the first one I remembered. But what was Moscow like?
Well, the Americans didn't go. That was at Moscow was Moscow. It was a 1980s Olympic Games for all those connotations. We won't go into what they all mean, but it was a well prepared team that went across there. It was very successful with Daly and Alan and Steve and all the crew that got the medals and so on. But it was like, that was my first Olympic Games. I'd been to Commonwealth Games before that. I've now been to 7 and got athletes into 7. I've been lucky enough to coach 14 Olympic athletes and 8 Olympic finalists. So across 7 Olympic Games. And so watching this 4-year cycle unfold has been part of all my experiences as well. And I learned from that each cycle that goes by. I think I'm better now leading up to Paris than I was certainly leading up to Moscow. What did I know? Blimey.
But what was it like for you, though, you've had this real burning desire to be involved in this, and all of a sudden you're at Olympic Games? What was that like?
Oh, bewildering, I would imagine. I mean, I'm just a few years older than some of the athletes there. I mean, I was just there and observing and watching. I was given jobs. I had jobs to do. You know, I was given certain athletes to take them through their final preparation and be supportive to them and support with their personal coach and take them through the warm-up area, take them through and report them and get them see what time the bus has got to go and what the best bus to take, and you're the last person to see them go through the tunnel into the call room. That's a tough environment for an athlete, and I was a stranger to some of them. I knew we'd worked over the years but not as their direct coach. I remember taking Alan Wells through before he won his gold medal, and seeing up front an athlete has done all the work, had been so perfectly well coached for the whole thing, and now has just got that last 30 minutes to do the right warm-up at the right time. And he turned to, I can remember he turned and said, Adam, look, and you've got to be able to say the right things at that point. Well, I don't know, I may have said the right thing. I thought he looked fantastic, and I just told him that, to be honest. And that's every one of these, it's a different world. When you want to prepare for an Olympic Games or a tournament competition, it's completely different to preparing for the local interclub, the weekly domestic competitions. We really must understand, and that's important for all high performance strategies, to really understand that difference. In other words, what are not just the physical and behavioral levels that you've got to reach, the technical, but the arena skills you've got to get to, but what's the pressure like when you go into those environments? It is a unique environment. You know, you march into the call room and you sit down, and it's the first Olympics you've been to, say, as a young athlete, and you sit in your heat level in a small room, and sitting opposite you is the world record holder. And you haven't. And normally at the interclub, when you're up in Manchester at the local club, your coach is there, and the coach is there. They walk you up right to the door, and they're still talking. They lean over the fence and talk to you, and it's all part of a nice homely atmosphere. Here, 45 minutes out, it's like going into the lion's den. So we have to understand these different arena skills for these tournaments that we go in. A completely different coaching methodology and coaching understanding to that, as opposed to the coaching understanding to, say, a 14-year-old in the local interclub weekly competition. It's all part of it. It's a journey, and we've got to prepare our coaches to be great at every part of that journey, with the 10-year-olds and taking their first faltering steps in this journey, to an Olympian going into the most fearful place is the Olympic semi-finals. I think Olympic finals are completely different to the semis, and to be able to handle there are 4 pillars to the preparation of an athlete, whether they're 4 years of age or 34 years of age: technical, tactical, or arena skills, physical, and behavioural mental. And those are the 4 pillars around which our coach development has to be born, because it's around those 4 elements that the athlete has to develop. And those 4 have to be woven together, and it's not a linear journey. And for each individual, that 4-pillar dance that goes on every second of the day is completely unique to somebody else. And that's the unfortunate thing of coach development today, or coach education today. It's become it's become an income stream for our sporting bureaucracies, and that's all they see it as. Whereas when you understand the journey, when I had to train to be a teacher, I had to train for 3 years, and I had to practice that teaching over 3 years with a mentor by my side and be criticised along the way and supported along the way as I grew to then being given the credentials to go out, at least start to teach. But we're teachers and coaches, and so pay your 250 quid and turn up for a weekend and spend 3/4 of your time looking at diversity and inclusion and all that kind of stuff, and then go and learn what it's like to win in a throwing it event, and then you walk out and you're supposed to be a coach, and who cares about you? You paid your $250. Unfortunately, the reality of what coach development must look like has been completely lost on the bureaucracy. And because they are career bureaucrats, they're not educators, they're not coaches, and that's the unfortunate thing. So coach development, I can tell you, in the last 2 days, in one of the home areas in the UK, a colleague of mine has just been asked to write the athlete pathway, the athlete performance pathway for this part of the country, and he'll do a fantastic job, I know he will, but it'll fall on deaf ears because every single year the bureaucracy say, well, we better do something to shut them up. Let's put a England Athletics this week have put out a survey to all the coaches in the clubs in England in athletics, a survey, another survey, and I'm thinking, are you telling me that you don't know what's happening at the club level in the coach-athlete relationships that are going on at those clubs from 8 years of age through to 20 years of age? You're having to put a survey out there because nobody from the bureaucracy is going out and finding out what is happening in the coach-athlete interface at all the different clubs in the country. Oh, but they feel better now, the bureaucracy do, because we've sent out a survey. And that's as far as they go, putting survey. Once we really understand what this journey of the athlete is like, and it has to be matched by the journey of the coach, then I think we might approach coach development and athlete development in a different way. But unfortunately, the decisions are made by career bureaucrats who have no idea, as proven by doing a survey to find out what's going on all the clubs. I hope they realise what answers they might get from the coaches. And that's the unfortunate thing. The 99.9% are volunteers. And they're salt of the earth.
But is that happening in other countries as well?
Oh, every bureaucracy, every sport is just the same. And I describe it as let's just back off a second. There are two elements to this in terms of athlete and coach development. That they both exist in a world where there are two really difficult pressures being put on them. So the first one is what adults give as pressure to developing athletes. Adults always talk in terms of winning, of results, of ranking. That's what they look at. Everything is to do with performance. It's a watered down adult version that we give to the kids, when we should be looking at great communication skills, empathy with the kids, understanding them, communicating well with them, having great empathy with them, and creating joy and enjoyment and progression with no pressure to it. That's the kind of journey we've got to put together. But it's bombarded by the fact that it's the adults that are putting all this together. It's the adults, all they want to talk about is winning, ranking, and being selected to a certain squad. And it changes exactly how somebody goes out and coaches. Instead of coaching based on the journey the young person's going on, they coach based on the adult desire and the adult belief system. And nobody's willing to change that. Then the second culprit to this is the bureaucracy itself of each sport. because they again they feel like their world is all about winning and medals and their own position. What can we do to stay in power? That's what we as a bureaucracy we need to consider. And that's why most bureaucracies and most sports now, the only thing they think about is high performance, because high performance is really attractive to money. It's attractive to government decisions, medal counts, world rankings, and those kind of things. But it creates a trough around which all the bureaucrats start lining up, and in that trough is millions and millions and millions of pounds going into it for all these wonderful new ideas that UK Sport are, and over here it's Australian Sports Commission are going to put in. It all revolves around winning and rankings and all this, and so this becomes the language and the vocabulary of what we're all trying to exist in. And we go, hang on a minute, this is not the journey. In all the places I've been, so with British Athletics, England Athletics, Scottish Athletics, the Brisbane Broncos, I did 15 years inside Rugby League as a direct performance specialist, the Australian Rugby Union, the Queensland Academy of Sport, all the places that I've worked in, it's all been high performance. I understand that. You know, to go and get to, I'm quite happy to go and try and win things for people. But each one of those, whenever the problems started to arise, and they always arise as you chase your winning and your rankings and your medals, then it demanded to say, why have we got these difficulties? And when you looked at the technical, the tactical, the physical and the behavioural development of these superstar players or athletes you've got in front of you, and you look at the limitations, you go, hang on a minute, what has gone before determines what is yet to come. We better, let's go and look at what raw materials we're recruiting into this Olympic movement or this rugby league team or this Queensland Academy of High Performance. Let's look at the raw materials we're choosing from. So you go and you come, get out of your ivory tower and you go and look right at the club level. You go and look and see what's being taught. How is it being taught? How is it being coached? Technically, tactically, physically and behaviourally. And you realise that you go, it's been taught badly. No wonder we've got all these problems when it comes to going after the medals. And you go back and you look, because the poor coaches down there, who are this 99% of our coaching population, who are all honorary manpower, volunteers, they've been taught to do this because they're stuck in the paradigm of winning and rankings and all the rest of it. And it's not just them, so are the kids. And then when you decide to have a really close investigation of what's happening with your raw materials in those early stages of development, and you realise across technical, tactical, physical and behavioural that they've got chronic limitations going on and are being embraced all the way through that. And there's no observation to try and check out if this is the smartest way we can go about things. So when you look and you say, okay, let's just check on these basics that should be going on. Whatever we're doing, we should be working on efficiency, consistency, and resilience. So whether it's a movement, it's a technique, it's a posture, it's a mechanical part of the development, or it's a metabolic part of the development, we first of all got to develop efficiency in that skill, whether it's whether it's a metabolic or a mechanical skill. Then we've got to be consistent at doing that. We've got to create an environment that allows consistency to develop. And then we've got to make sure that it's resilient. It can survive fatigue, speed and pressure and those things. And that should become the framework that you see in schools, in PE, in coaching in clubs, with the under-8s and the under-9s all the way through to the mid-teens. And you should look for that framework. Now, doesn't exist. Go and look for that framework in coach education. Not in there. Those words don't exist in there. Then you also go and look now, are we looking at a general to related to specific journey that's going on inside this entire framework? In other words, are they earning the right to move themselves forward? Now, the efficiency, consistency and resilience framework, coupled with the general to related to specific framework, are not linear. And so we can start to understand now that this coaching teaching game is not easy. It has to be well taught and well experienced and well practiced in coach development. Not 250 quid for a weekend of listening to talking about all those other things that are coming into coach education now, diversity and inclusion and safeguarding and all that. Get the coaches to be able to coach using those two frameworks. And the efficiency, consistency and resilience, coupled with the general to related to specific, is driven and aimed at this one outcome: consistently attractive, progressive learning. It's a learning-centric program, coach development, as athlete development is. It's not an information-centric one. Oh, let's just list all these things, throw all this stuff out, give them a magazine to read and this and whatever. This is how you do a sprint start. And it's all about giving explicit learning. No. When you look deep inside all the learning strategies that we can teach these coaches, the entire explicit to implicit learning continuum, which is full of some incredible models and techniques to use, not hard to learn, really interesting, fabulous to pass on to coaches for them to practice. I mean, there's all sorts of words that go with it, which I won't bore you with, but to become learning centric as a teacher or a coach and not information centric should be replicated inside coach education, because that's exactly how the athletes are going to progress along the journey. Sorry, I'm rambling now, but
no, it's interesting. I mean,
that's the difference. That is the difference now. It's no use turning to the bureaucracy and asking them to do it. They haven't done it for 40 years and they will not do it. So the only way now is to get some like-minded coaches together in your region. It could be at a different club to you. Get yourselves together, try and find some other smart people and start sharing amongst yourselves and start looking at technical, tactical, physical and behavioural. How can I put efficiency, consistency and resilience alongside general to related to specific as the vehicle that I'm going to use, and build everything around that. Film it, share the videos with each other, go out and practice it, with the kids, run little models and workshops in the club just before you go out and coach, and change your attitude and get rid of this winning at all cost stuff. It's going to take a complete change. It's going to take a change in vocabulary and words in the whole thing. Adults are going to have to change on this, and unfortunately it's not going to happen in my lifetime. And the reason I say that, as cynical as I am, I've been trying to change this for 40 years. Now I'm either wrong, but it's not. There are much smarter people than me out there that really understand this, and hope. You just hope that something might change. I mean, I didn't want to. I actually applied for one of the jobs in the UK when UK athletics wanted to have the brand new coach development system. It'll just go down the toilet again. We just need the right people in the right places asking the right questions. That it's not going to. Sorry, you ask me a question.
No. It was interesting. I mean, when you were talking there, it took me back to when I was doing my PE A level and the Barber and App definition of skill and kind of focusing on those things. But so when you were at British Athletics then, and then were you thinking that then as well? Was it the same 40 years ago?
Well, yeah, well, it was, and it wasn't because it was anything to do with my ideas. But let me give you just two people. Let's look at, say, Tom McNabb and Frank Dick and Alan Launder. If you go back to that time, we had what was called the 5-star award system that went out into all the schools, where you just chased a personal best. You weren't doing it so you could make the international team or to win the next competition. You were doing it to see if you could be better at running, jumping and throwing. So that philosophy This isn't a modern day philosophy I've just put forward. It's something that I was exposed to way back there. Dr. Challoner's school, where Alan Launder was, they began to develop that system. And it meant all the teachers and the coaches were beginning now to present the world of athletics in this way, which is far more benign. It was exploration. It was guided discovery. It wasn't all about getting ready for the next contest and see how many medals you could win. It wasn't that. So that philosophy was back there. But when Frank Dick's, one of Frank Dick's very first books was called But First. What's the first thing you got to do? What's the first step you've got to take? And that's where I've spent my time. Again, but it's what I learned back there. But every time I'd run into problems of winning, I did those 15 years in rugby league and reached 7 grand finals and won 5 of them. So I was lucky, I guess, with the people around me, and some of the thoughts and ideas I'd had seemed to work. But one of the things when you were at that high pressure situation all the time was to ensure that you were going back and looking at the fundamentals. And that seemed to be, people seem to think that fundamentals aren't important. Fundamentals are it, that there is nothing else. A sophisticated fundamental is the technique you use in the Olympic 100 meters final. So understanding what the basics are, what is the first step you've got to take? And that's where I because I was facing these problems in all the footballers I was working with and the athletes that I was working with, and realizing, I went back to the foundation movements that glue all this together, because we were no longer getting that taught in physical education. Somebody took the physical out of physical education 50 years ago. So, and kids now, they don't go out, they don't spontaneously move. But way back when we had PE, it was based on, in my day, it was based on being a fit specimen. It was based on mechanical and metabolic fitness. And then it was exploration through guided discovery through educational gymnastics and formal gymnastics. And then games was a product of that. And then some idiots came along in, I don't know when, 70s, 80s, 90s, and made PE a competitive games-based curriculum. Biggest mistake on the planet. We moved away from the physical health and well-being of the individual. We moved away from that foundation, fundamental movements. And so, because everything I was finding in trying to win medals and win championships with these places, I was tracking it back to that. And that's where I got onto the physical competence assessment. Well, I'm going to start finding out if these people who want to come on this journey to win something, have they got the foundation movement sorted out? The ability to squat, lunge, pull, push, brace, rotate, hinge, and land. Are those efficient, consistent, and resilient? Because that's the building blocks upon which I'm going to put the sport-specific stuff. No, doesn't exist. So we're putting the sport-specific stuff on fresh air, and that's why there's been a movement now since a group of us had a crack at this 20 years ago of understand what are the foundation movements: squat, lunge, pull, push, brace, rotate, hinge, and land. They've got to appear. They've got to become expert at this. They've got to have efficiency, consistency, and resilience in this, going through a journey of general to related specific. Out of it will come running, jumping, throwing, kicking, catching, striking. They will be the foundation to those things. Then out of that comes the competition-based stuff. That's the journey. And we ignore the first 2 steps of it and go straight to the competition-specific stuff. Why? Because that's the language and the vocabulary that the adults have now forced into the development of kids. When the adults change, we've got a chance. There's a group of practitioners out there that I work with on a day-to-day basis that understand these foundation movements, understand how to teach them and to coach them, understand how to put movement breaks inside a PE lesson, understand how to put movement breaks inside a soccer lesson, understand how to use the current systems and infiltrate it with the foundation movements, which we lost a long time ago. So there are opportunities out there for us to try and make up for the problems that we created ourselves. but we've got to go back, and I don't know how we do it. The only way to do it is to share amongst yourselves, because the coach education, it's an income stream for the bureaucracy. They don't care about it. As soon as you walk out with your certificate, it should be that when somebody gets their certificate to be an athletics coach after their 250 quid 2 weekends, that's when their education starts. But that's when their education stops, because nobody turns up to see how they're going. There's no quality control in coach development at all from the national governing bodies. They have to send out surveys to find out what's going on. Sorry.
No, it's interesting. So, no, I mean, that really interesting. We might come back on some of that later on as well. So after British Athletics, how long were you there for, and what did you go on to do next?
Well, that's when I made my first stupid mistake. I should have stayed put in the UK and learnt my trade in the presence of these masters that were so helpful to me. But your ego gets involved. I had a phone call. We were presenting the results of, I think it was late 80. We were presenting the Olympic report, the European Coaches Conference up in Scotland, I think. And I think Wilford dropped me in it. The Australians had a terrible time in the 76 Olympic Games in Montreal. Disgraceful, awful. And because nobody was trying to support the athletes and the coaches, nobody was. And luckily, Malcolm Fraser, who was the Prime Minister, he turns up to the Olympic Games, as they do. They all turn up to the Olympic Games. They were one of their freebies. And he ran smack into the teeth of this really grumpy group of athletes who felt like they'd been let down terribly. And would you believe it? He listened to him. He goes back and he said, after 76, he said, we need a high performance strategy inside the country. And he created the Australian Institute of Sport. And he put eight sports in there to start with: swimming, track and field, basketball, netball, and on and on, gymnastics, etc. And I had to get head coaches for each one. Wilf put my name forward to him far too early. I think I was 34 years of age and still didn't know what day it was. But it sounded nice, and the grass was greener, I guess. I mean, it's hard work being a national coach. The boys were right. You know, you're up all day, every day, travelling around the country, and it's hard work. And they offered me a lot of money to go out there to be the first track and field coach at the Australian Institute of Sport. And like an idiot, I said yes. It was attractive. I was 34, it's sunshine, lots more money, and you know, and being in charge of something at the age of 34. Stupid, but a trap that many will continue to fall into. So I finished up in early 1981, arriving at the Australian Institute of Sport in Canberra, inheriting 30 athletes with no idea who they were, and I was told by the chief executive, right, we've got the Brisbane Commonwealth Games in 18 months from now, you've got to win some medals. That was the job. But, and there was only me, and there was another coach that was already there in a part-time position, and we had to try and build it from the ground up. So now the thing that I was really hopeless at, I thought I could coach okay, was the political things that went with it. I mean, it was awful. It was just trying to deal with a bureaucracy that thought they knew about the sport, and you're coaching these 30 athletes. And but anyway, look, we did well. We won, I think, 62% of all Australia's medals at the Barcelona, at the Brisbane Games at that time. And my coaching then really accelerated. I was lucky. I had some great athletes, and we finished up with Olympians and 7 Australian record holders, and because a record that still stands now, 40 odd years later, and barely we were performing really well. And I lasted 5 years there until I fell out with the administration one too many times. They were hopeless as an administration. And
so why did you class that as a mistake then? If it sounds like it was really successful.
Look, from a coaching point of view, you know, the medals that we won and the world rankings that we raced them up to and all that, I'm very proud. I'm very proud of those athletes, of what they did. And across a whole variety, I was coaching 800 meters, 100 meters, javelin, triple jump, long jump, high jump, and setting Australian records in all those, and area records, and then going to Olympic Games and finishing finishing sixth and so on and so forth. Yes, from that point of view, it was okay, but I was 34 and then 39 by the time I finished, and that's at the time you've got to. If you need a lot of experience at this time, not just this isn't just about the coaching part of it. I think once you can coach and you can teach, and somebody's taught you how to teach and coach, you just get better and better and better, and you start making less mistakes. And I watched my coaching do that. I made less mistakes. Why? Because I just kept on learning from as many people as possible. But what comes with the strategic political parts of it, where you try and strategically also make a contribution to where a nation is going and how they should look at the next 2 decades and the kind of principle, the national performance strategies they should put in place, and so on. And so all the things that we've spoken about before, you know, to put in general to related to specifics, efficiency, consistency, resilience, put instructions and all that. That, as the head coach at the institute, I was in that. That's a strong position to be in, and I really didn't have the experience to present all these cases well. 34 now, 54. I think I would have been a lot better at going in there, a lot more now. Prepare, having an experience to use to manipulate and maneuver through what was facing me. Not so much the coaching. The coaching my coaching now is probably better than it's ever been. I'm making less mistakes now. I've just got more patient and those kind of things. But so I think, put it this way, I should have served a longer apprenticeship before stepping into this attractive celebrity type of position. I should have done that. There's no doubt. So that's why I felt it was a mistake.
Right. And so what did he go on to do after that?
So that would take me to 85. So I did two Olympics there, one Olympics there, as a direct coach of the team and so on. And then so I left the institute in 85, and I decided to stay because I'd got those athletes. The athletes left with me, and that was an important thing, an important decision to make, right or wrong. It was an important decision to make, and I made the decision to stay in Australia, jobless. And so I started to work as a teacher. I'd still got my qualification, so I could do relief teaching and coach the athletes as well. And we went right through to 85. I became a member of the Nike International Committee, which was a small group of coaches that could travel the world on behalf of Nike and help other countries. So that gave me a bit of an income as well. Then I met some rugby league players from the Canberra Raiders, which had moved into the competition about 5 years before that, and they were just they were building themselves into the major national rugby league competition. And I met some of the players that wanted to get better, and so they came, and I joined in with them, and I tried to help them as I could to try and take the principles that I'd learned in terms of performance and manipulate it into a team sport. As an individual person in a team sport. And I spent the entire off season with that group. They appointed a new coach called Wayne Bennett into his first big professional job. And when the players said, look, Kelvin's helping us a lot and helping us. And Wayne said, can you come along on a Wednesday night to training and carry on what you're doing? So I joined the Canberra Raiders then in this part-time capacity. The staff there were willing to listen and learn, and I had to listen and learn about the new sport, and we started doing things different. and it was completely different. Now, Wayne left after a year and a new coach came in, Tim Sheens, and I'd begun to change some of the structures in there. We were now doing we were doing the balance of training as we used to. The 5 S factors are all being spread through the season and through the week, and we were introducing them to strength training and specific performance enhancement training in their running and the mechanics of running and all the rest of it. Pretty badly compared with what I'm doing now, and that transformed them, and Tim Sheens was willing to go along with it. And so I began to then take more role in there of guiding them towards the kind of things they could be doing, completely different to all the other clubs. And we spent, so we got to 1980s. When Wayne was there, we reached a grand final. And then the next year in 1988, Tim arrived and they made semi-finals. And in 1989, this is now 2 years into this different training plan, completely different training plan. And I was lucky that the coaches were willing to listen. They reached the grand final as the underdogs and won it. And 1989 goes down as one of the greatest grand finals ever. We were losing with 60 seconds to go. But with this, the resilience that we'd built up, the emotional and the physical resilience that we'd built up with them, I thought came to the fore. And with 60 seconds to go, Chicka Ferguson scores, Mal converts it, and we're tied up. We go into extra time and won it in extra time with a most incredible try. If you ever look at the 1989 grand final, go and watch it. It's worth looking at. And that was really, and that was watching these ideas come to fruition. I then got the phone call from Wayne Bennett, who had now taken over the Brisbane Broncos, to go and join him, and with an open checkbook, basically, not a checkbook financially, but whatever it's going to take, you can do. So I went up there and met with their board and said, it's no use me coming here if you're not going to listen to it. You know, this is where I'd like to take you to. In other words, it was using the correct training principles that hadn't been done in there. And off we went. And we won their reserve grade in 2 years later. Their reserve team won their grand final in 1990. In 1992, they became national champions. In 93, national champions. And it was I did 6 years there as the director of performance, looking after all the things that directors of performance look after. Wayne did the coaching, and I look after all the other stuff, from the sports science, the sports medicine, the strength and conditioning, and away we went. And it was a dynasty. It was fantastic. But and during that time, I was also still coaching Olympians. I had two in the Olympic team in '92 in Barcelona. So I was now a hobby coach. I was a volunteer coach in athletics. I got my full-time job in the day in a football team, and I was working with athletes in the evenings, as all the other coaches do, and got 2 in the team in '92. I left the Broncos in '95. I just had to return to coaching. I was a bit of a duck out of water, really. I mean, I'm a coach. I'm not a strength and I was just looking after all the fitness stuff, and I needed to get back to my own roots, basically. So I left the Broncos then. Finished up going back in 2005 and won it again then, and then started branching out into this coach development world that accelerated. I went to London and worked with the London Broncos. That allowed me to do some of the stuff for them, but also helped more with their development characteristics, and started to do lectures locally and around the country on some of these principles. Finished up back in Australia in 2001 and was appointed to be the head of athlete preparation for the Queensland Academy of Sport, leading through to the 2004 games in Athens and 2008 in Beijing, and that's where I could assemble some of the best practitioners. Some of the world's best came through that, and I could list them all now, and I'd miss somebody off, but they are the best in the world, some of these blokes and girls. You see what they're doing now with the Suki Hobson, and you look at Dean Benton and Lachlan Penfold, just that entire Jeremy Hickman's, that entire crew. That I hope I taught them well and they taught me well, and they've become Chris Gaviglio. It's a crew that are like the Milwaukee Bucks. There's two of them in there at the moment, and they've just been next to one of the best teams in the last 3 or 4 years across there. They're just first class, and with that crew, we won 65% of Australia's medals came out of the Queensland Academy of Sport in Athens. That was good. That's really heavy hitting stuff. But it was at that point again that every time we'd get these 15 or 16-year-olds to come into the academy, we would then begin to do the competence screening on them. I'd learned by then to say, let's not try and, we were told you've got 4 to 8 years to get them into the Olympic team, and we'd say, well, until you do your job better down at club level, we've got to build them from the ground up again. So you can double that time. So we had to, we did competence screening on them metabolically and mechanically, and then we had to build them from the ground up. So we spent many, many years putting together these efficiency, consistency, resilience, general related specific journeys across every single sport you could consider. I left there and I got headhunted because that worked so well. I got headhunted by the Australian Rugby Union to go and do the same for them. And that was a good one because we finished up, that was 2005. The strategy was, and they listened to it, was we're going to aim for 2015 World Cup. That's what we're after. Are you willing to be that patient? And we built them from the ground up. And I think that strategy from 2005 to 15, that decade, 86% of the young players that we got made the Wallabies international team. And we had a special group inside there, a special 12 that we had particular attention was paid to. Those 12 all played 50 tests for Australia. So understanding what you've got to do to create this and enhance this journey, we've now, we've at the Queensland Academy and Australian Rugby Union and back at the Brisbane Broncos and at the London Broncos, these principles aren't just me having an idea in my head. This has been developed. So when I say to you efficiency, consistency and resilience and general to related to specific, I'm not just playing with words. This is a systematic progression, and it needs coaches to understand it and then know how to teach it with all the learning opportunities they've got. Now we're talking about coach development. Sorry, I just rambled a bit then, didn't I?
No, that was really interesting on that, because so is that happening though? Is this happening? Like you see football over here, like they're playing matches at 5 by Man City or Man United or whoever it is around here.
No, there's little pockets. When I came back home in 2007, I was invited to come back and speak with people in golf and this and that and whatever. And I decided, I thought, I want to go home, and I've been wanting to go home for years and years and years. So I thought, bugger it. I left the Australian Rugby Union and I went to live with my sister down in Biggleswade, and I started my own system. I said, okay, I'm just going to turn up. If people invite me, I'll turn up and I'll try and explain all this to them. I'll try and do lectures and presentations and workshops and just try that. So we started that. I started doing that. I didn't have any money, but I finished up. I bought a car a year later. It took me a year to sort of find my feet, and lucky my sister was looking after me. And I began to meet more and more people that were willing to listen to this kind of strategic look at things. There are more individuals, but there were a few groups, and Scottish Athletics were the one that had a real crack at it. And we completely revamped coach education for Scottish Athletics. Around the 2011 mark, we developed all what I've spoken to you about demands resources and information and education and practice and with Mark Monroe and Darren Ritchie, these two young firebrands that were just so keen on it that they joined me on this, and we belted it and created a new structure. And look, there was a CEO there that was willing to back it. And we got to every one of the 25 clubs there, and we got information that they could work off on the movement principles, the foundation movements of squat, lunge, pull, the physical competence to do the technical stuff. And they understood that other phrase that goes with this: you need the physical competence to do the technical stuff, and the technical competence to do the tactical stuff, in that order. You can't bypass the first bit. And that isn't new. I remember Frank Dick talking about that in 1978. So this isn't some new stuff. This is just picking the things that we know work and trying to get them to become important again. So that's where you got to take it from me and you talking about this now to practical application. Last time I did this, because COVID hit, I went to Jersey, to the Jersey Sports Foundation. John Scriven and his crew across there. Wow. And we ran a workshop based on this movement efficiency, consistency and resilience. And a few came from the mainland and whatever. It's these that need to be the bread and butter. So when they walk out of their weekend with their certificate to coach athletics or to coach squash or whatever it is, that's when their education starts. And it's these workshops that then are the things that have to be delivered right on their doorstep. Regional delivery of this stuff, so that it reminds them they can turn up, they can have a 3-hour workshop and then go and coach it, a 3-hour workshop and go and coach it, and we never leave them alone. And they keep going until they've had 6 or 7 years of this workshopping and this quality control all the time, and then you know they've learned it. And so that's the means of taking it from me just rambling with you now to the practicalities of it. And I've tried to write this down. When I applied for that position with UK Athletics, I put this, I documented all this so they could see what does the athlete development journey look like and what does the coach development journey look like. Please put them both together. You've got to do that. Anyway, sorry, I've just rambled.
No, that's really interesting. And then so you mentioned, just going back to when you were talking about when you went to rugby and you were getting involved with the sports science and the medicine, and albeit that wasn't your origins, you're associated a lot with athletic development and that sort of area. At what point did you see other people starting to copy that and taking notice of it elsewhere?
Well, the football stuff we kept quite in-house at the Raiders and at the Broncos. We kept it in-house because we were having to take it from a theoretical stance into a practical one. For example, you get 15, 16 to 18-year-olds that you recognise somewhere in Queensland are the next generation of great players coming through. And you've got to try and get them associated with the club. Now, it used to be they'd just go out there, give them a T-shirt, give them a pair of football boots, pay mum and dad a bit of money, and then you've hooked them in and they'll become Broncos. We had to be better than that. What we had to do was to say, we've recognised this person at 15 as being potentially one of our players in 6 or 7 years' time. What on earth is he going to be doing for the next 5 or 6 years? We've got to control that. We've got to now. He was in Darren Lockyer, one of the superstars of the sport. But 15, 16, we knew how good he was. What we had to do was to get to the people that were going to influence him directly on a minute-to-minute basis for the next 6 years before he turned up in Brisbane at the age of 18 or 19. So the next 3 years from 15 to 18, that's when it could all go wrong. So what we had to do, from a nutritional point of view, a technical point of view, a physical point of view, and in the physical that was mechanical and metabolic, we had to get to his mum, his dad, his PE teachers, his local club coaches, and make them better and say, this is what you need to do with this young man if he's to come out the other end and join us with fewer limitations. And that meant, so we'd go to their local clubs and you'd run workshops for their coaches. So now you were helping those coaches not only look after Darren Lockyer, and that's what we were interested in, but that was helping all the other young kids in there, from the under 7s up to the under 9 and so on. We would teach them, what does a warm-up look like? What order do you do it in? Then we'd teach them, how do you feed back to somebody? When do you talk to the kids? What do you say? How long do you say it for? What drills are going to be there for their mechanical development, and what activities are there for their metabolic development, and what are the skills that you're doing, what are the things for their skill development? And are there some that can do both? And we would video little practices like that and hand them over. So we were also helping all the other clubs in the competition, because they'd got their eyes on other people. But that was where we began to look at all the aspects of it at the development stage inside the football stuff. That's how we had to do it. Otherwise, we knew if we left them alone, talent identification is the simplest thing in the world. If you can't develop it, why identify it? And that's what we had to go from. Identification. Oh, he's a great player, Lockyer. He's going to he'll play for Australia, which he did. But we'd got 3 years and we had no idea what he was going to do. We could have been destroyed in that time. So we had to then get to the people. So there's that other principle of, you've got to get to the coach. You've got to develop the coaches. It's no use identifying the talent if you can't develop it. So talent ID, we throw it out the window. No use identifying it as you can develop it. Sorry, was that anywhere near answering your question?
No, that's good. That's good. And then just finishing up then. So in terms of like the things that did you like read any books that have adapted the way of your philosophy outside of coaching, or is it all within?
No, I don't think I've read. I mean, I've had to read. I've had to keep up skilled in this. I mean, when you talk about outcome-based learning or external focus and the use of analogies in learning and constraints-based learning and all these highfalutin language and vocabulary that switches all the coaches off. Hang on, there's a bit to this stuff. I've had to read this. So Dweck and all those people that are really looking into and giving us the research. I've had to jump on board with that over the last 30 years to make sure I understand it. I was brought up on Astran and Rodal in terms of exercise physiology back in 1970. So when I did my master's across there was some exercise physiology and biomechanics in there and so on and so forth. So I'd begun back in 1970, 71, 72 to explore the mechanical and the metabolic areas. But the learning areas, I started there, obviously, Barbara Knapp and we were taught through our education development on Piaget and all the learning stuff and how educational gymnastics and the exploration and all these kind of things, from the implicit to the explicit variety of learning situation you come up with. Yeah, I learned that a long time ago, but I really had to know what I was doing nowadays. There's another thing that really comes out nowadays as well, and this is to all the coaches out there. You've got to be very, very careful what research you turn to, because there is so much shoddy research out there. And I understand the reasons why it's shoddy, and it isn't me that's saying this. Is one of the best researchers in the UK, Ivan Robertson, in terms of what he's been looking at research. And the fact is that because research grants in the universities are very heavy hitting for the income for them, anybody can do research nowadays. The quality control and research has gone down the toilet. I don't know what research I can trust. Luckily, I've been reading and trying to educate myself for the last 40 years. So I'm beginning now to know where I should go to read things. The celebrity research stuff, you got to be very careful of. The way I describe it is this, that to increase your own understanding of things, you need a very, very, very good bullshit monitor. Because in the world of research and writing, there is the online people, it can tell you down the garden path. Be very, very careful who you listen to and whose research you read. I've managed to, I don't think I make many mistakes nowadays on who I'm listening to. I've had enough time to ditch all the bull crap and get to the people that really matter. So that's an important one when you're trying to educate yourself. You got to be very careful. And that's all I can say. If you can get inside a group of people and you can share amongst each other, fellow coaches in the region sharing with each other, then you tend to find out where the bullshit's coming from, and you can tend to get some more trust in certain things.
Yeah, and then last question. So you obviously got a longing for the UK as well. So how come you've ended up, you're still in Brisbane?
All those years of me doing what I wanted to do, Pauline was just following around, and the kids as well, and I was just climbing mountains and being horrible. It's her turn now. So when we were in the UK and I was working for across those 2 Olympic cycles, and she'd travel everywhere with me. She knew every word I'd speak in all my presentations, and then she said, I want to go back to Brisbane. That's where the kids are. I said, right, here we go. So the days of me making that decision are gone. It's whatever my wife wants to do now, we will do. Thank you very much.
That's a perfect note to finish on. Kelvin, I've really enjoyed that today. So it's been fascinating. Just seeing your passion and your drive for this is really good. And like you've got some incredible stories from a long time ago up to recent days. So thank you for sharing.
Pleasure.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kelvin.
All right. Okay.
Brilliant.